In the past 7 days, I've generated almost $139,000 in cash for my client, over $175,000 in revenue, all using a webinar funnel. Here's some proof just to start us off. On Saturday, we did about 35K cash within 1 hour. Here's the funnel, here's the presentation. We did over £100,000. It's a UK offer. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down the entire funnel, the entire process, why we ran a webinar, the research process, the launch process, how we got people to show up, and how we actually got them to buy our offer. So let's get started with the why. Why did my clients and why do I run webinars? Number one, it's a new conversion mechanism. If you're a coach who's running an info offer, you've been running it for a while, you've been running, a cool funnel, VSL funnel, DM funnel, you've probably got a lot of leads who, the market's getting more aware, they're trusting less, they've been on one-to-one calls before with closers who've wanted to get them sell their left kidney. And simply put, they're not going to close with your same VSL that you've been running for the last 6 months, right? And just to show some proof, this is basically what the offer had been doing. They'd been running the same VSL for over a year, the same DM funnel, the same kind of CTAs, and they had so many leads that we actually closed that had previously said the offer was too expensive, had originally booked, but not got in contact since and had basically ghosted. Had booked a call in July, at the end of September, been in the pipeline, but then only closed after the webinar because it's a new conversion mechanism that invites people to come back after they've been involved with the offer before, give them some free value. It's very easy to put your hand up and attend a webinar compared to jumping on a one-to-one call, and then pitch them again after giving them value, after reframing their beliefs on a new offer that has bonuses, that has scarcity and all of that. Also, a key reason why people are closing after the webinar is because of the trust and watch time. Like I just said, they get a lot of value, but they also build a lot of trust. And the average time in our webinar room for this client was 1 hour and 38 minutes, which is pretty fucking crazy, right? People say, you need 7 hours of watch time to convert a high ticket client. Well, an hour and a half of live watch time is pretty good because it builds so much trust and it gives the content creator, the offer owners, time to actually give the value and share value with no interruption. And it's the reason why Alex Hormozy, even Charlie Morgan now, Shelby Sapp, they're all running webinars because it's also more efficient to be able to give that level of trust and build that level of value compared to like a long form YouTube video, which is great. But on a live stream where people can interact, can ask questions, it's just another level, which is why webinars, again, are so good. Also, because they're replicable. Once you've built a webinar funnel out, you've built the presentation, it's very, very repeatable. I run webinars with my clients typically bi-monthly or monthly, just to clean up and hoover up that pipeline. And if you've never run a webinar before, then you can really hoover up your pipeline and generate a ton of money with your offer. And it's for that reason that I think anyone running a coaching business doing over 50K a month would benefit from a webinar if they haven't run one before. And even if you think, what if I burn my leads, I don't want to hard pitch them, even if leads don't close, they're still left with a ton of value, more trusting of you. And we've had leads come back after weeks, after months, after a webinar where they're like, okay, now's the time. I want to get started, right? Another common question I see is like, I don't want it to disrupt what I've currently got going. I don't want it to ruin my VSL funnel. I'm going to be out of pocket for the week that, we do the webinar. But historically, with all of my clients, we've seen actually re-engagement in the normal funnels, the DM funnel, the VSL funnel, more bookings, even during the promo of the webinar, because people hear about the webinar, they're like, oh shit, I'm actually interested. And they go ahead and book a call before the webinar itself, as well as, of course, a huge boost in sales in the weeks and months after the webinar, after you've cleaned up your pipeline, because all of those leads, they're like, I remember that webinar. You don't sit on a 2-hour webinar and just forget about it. Although I've forgotten many YouTube videos that I watched, which is why, of course, we ran a webinar. This is why my clients wanted to run a webinar and what I say to all of my clients. In terms of executing on this webinar, first of all, who are my clients? So my clients are Alex and Jansen. They run a e-commerce coaching business called Honest Brands. It's kind of like e-commerce, but also TikTok shop integrated in Amazon FBA as well, kind of all three in one, which is really, really cool. And Alex also runs 1.4 million a month ecom brand. He is the real deal. They are the real deal. Their offer is absolutely phenomenal. The offer is a 7.5k pounds ticket off, so almost 10k USD. So we are targeting quite an upmarket demographic. And for me and my team to be able to write an exceptional webinar with exceptional copy and do all of the process efficiently, of course, we use AI to understand the pain points, the desires, and all of the context surrounding the ICP, our ideal client profile that we're writing to. Also, it helps us understand not only, the brand owners, the offer owners themselves, but also the philosophy and the context surrounding their journey, right? Which all in turn allows us to write exceptional copy that hits home and generates hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash. So whenever you're writing, even for any offer, even if you're not running a webinar, you need these 5 documents. Even if this is your offer, you need these 5 documents about yourself to be able to write the best copy possible for the offer. Right. Of course, if you're an amazing copywriter by yourself and you don't need AI, fantastic. But for me, we use AI for ideation, sometimes full copy where we go in and tweak it humanly. So the first one is a brand voice document where you want to take all of the YouTube transcripts from the offer and put them into a prompt, into GPT or Claude, whatever you want to use, and say essentially, I need to have an exact brand voice profile in JSON. JSON is kind of AI language that tells me all of the core voice attributes, all of the personality traits, all of the relationship this person has with their audience, the sentence structure, the punctuation, the grammar, the common phrases that they use, so that I can write the best email copy possible. I need a 10 out of 10 super detailed JSON file similar to this one, and you can take a screenshot of this one of kind of how it started. This basically tells the AI when you write the copy how the offer owner communicates, how he speaks, so that all of the messaging is aligned, and also so that it doesn't sound like just pure AI slop. The second thing that you're going to need is a brand story profile document, so that the AI can understand the journey that your client or the offer owner has gone under to be able to write copy that aligns with that kind of story, that even weaves in part of that story. So once again, you're going to ask AI to, I need you based on these YouTube transcripts. And luckily for us, we had a couple of kind of story YouTube videos from Alex himself that really helped, where essentially we could piece together and ask AI to build a huge JSON document on exactly his story and the offer owners, their story, so that AI could use that as context. And if you want the full prompts, just send me a DM on Instagram. Then we analyze sales calls, because really, you can do as much as you can from YouTube, but understanding who is actually buying this offer is pivotal. So we analyzed all of the exact pain points and the exact desires from 30 plus sales calls into one document, the biggest objections, the biggest selling points of the offer, so that we could understand that as well for all of our copy. Also, a document with all of the client results. So what we did is we took all of the YouTube interview transcripts, put them all into a doc, all of the Trustpilot reviews, everything into a document, asked for it in JSON, essentially so that we could, instead of having to watch all of these client interviews ourselves, understand every single part of the interview, integrate it into the copy effectively without having to actually put it all into our brains, then onto the page. And then most importantly is the ICP document, right? This is probably the most important. What you want to do is you want to kind of use the sales call recordings and then also all of the other documents that you've already created to create a comprehensive document where you ask AI to give you all of these things in extreme detail. So a complete demographic and psychological overview, a raw internal monologue sample. This is all detail about the exact person that you're targeting, the online communities and content that they consume, how they speak, the psychological barriers and the limiting beliefs that they have, their deepest fears, their emotional triggers, the exact objections that they have towards the offer that we have to break before they buy, and the exact transformation that we're helping them overcome. And of course, a bunch of other stuff involved in that as well, but these are the main ones. So create an ICP document so that you know who you're writing to. All of that should be put into a Claude profile. Claude is by far the best AI copywriting tool. So put that into one Claude project. You're going to have to pay $20 a month. And then essentially what you can do is combine it with existing copy. So copy that you've seen work on other webinars, emails that you've liked the look of, that you think convert well, or even asking AI using the text that we can use here to actually write emails, write whatever copy, write some of the presentation. I don't recommend using it fully for the presentation because it can cook things a little bit. But for the small parts of the copy, to keep everything in line, using AI is absolutely phenomenal. So this is our main list kind of email flow for when we announce a webinar. So we have the announcement, free coaching hook, a value dense hook, a shock hook, these sort of things. And we have templates for all of these emails. So essentially what we can do is ask, using a similar prompt to this, is telling the AI, you are Dan Kennedy and Jason Flanagan combined. You're a legend of direct response copy. You write amazing emails. You write amazing webinars that drive qualified prospects to do X at maximum, to convert a maximum ROAS. speaking directly to our ICP's deepest frustrations and biggest dreams. Then we can use examples of the copy that we're asking it to write. So, use these examples of copy, but don't steal them directly. And then also, most importantly, use all of the context in project files to write the highest converting copy possible for the offer. And then essentially, it will scan all of these, understand the client results, understand the brand story, understand the brand voice, understand the pain points, understand who it's writing to, and write exceptional copy. Now, great, we've done the market research, we know who you're writing to, but we need to launch the webinar, right? We need to get traffic from the off, right, from social media, from the internet, to our registration page. And the way we did this is with 3 sources. First of all, we'll go through the main source, which was paid traffic. So we spent about $24,000 on ads for this webinar. Overall, the ROAS was about 6, but not all of our closes came from ads, as I'll get into. But about 90% of our traffic was from cold. Our ad strategy with new clients, especially when it's their first webinar, is keep things super, super simple. There's no need to go overboard. So what we did is we used the winning creatives that existed that we knew would be, converting and attracting the right type of people, simply with new CTAs. We also then wrote completely new webinar-specific ads with winning messaging from previous webinar campaigns that we've written for similar target demographics, similar kind of biz op offers. So using these AI docs, we're rewriting our previous winning ads, like I say here. Now, something to bear in mind is that we got about 1,300 leads for this $20,000 odd, right? And our cost per lead blended was about $18.50, right? which is really high. Like cost per registrant, $18.50 is stupidly high. But we were aware coming into the webinar that the ICP, based on our research, was upmarket professionals who wanted to transition into an online business model to have more freedom and to build a second income stream. The program itself is $10,000, the flagship offer. And so we know that targeting those sorts of people is going to be more expensive with ads. So although typically we look for between $3 and $10 cost per lead, the cost per lead for the webinar was $18.50. Yet we still got an amazing ROAS because we knew beforehand that we were going to have a higher cost per acquisition and all of that. So apart from that, we also used obviously the main email list for the offer. And if you've got an offer with a big email list that you haven't really tapped into, if you've got an offer where you've been running it for a long time, you've got a lot of tight form emails. Email lists you can abuse it completely to get a lot of signups to the webinar because people aren't actually just converting with the normal emails you're sending them. Firstly, because this email hadn't really been warmed up too much, although there were a lot of emails, we had about 10,000. We first gave them value, so we sent a value-based email, and then we sent a case study-based email that again gave them more value to just warm them up. And then we started the promotion emails, which I kind of showed you in the last section of the announcement, the free coaching hook, all of these different emails to that list to make sure that they knew about the webinar. There was no way that they could not, register for the webinar if they were interested. There's no way that they could not hear about it. Sending them all, of course, to the registration page. And then finally, we had some organic reach, about 5 to 10% organic reach from story sequences from Alex. So story sequences, my framework is always something along these lines. So hook, the story itself, kind of a story, then proof, and then a CTA. So how this could look and how this looked for across the board for Alex's stories were, hook, my e-commerce brand is on track to make $1.4 million this month, right? But it wasn't always like this. We had to scale. We went through 6 years of hardship, and we learned so many lessons along the way. So tying in a story. Since then, we've started our coaching community where we've helped XYZ exit their brand, XYZ get this result. On Wednesday, the webinar was, I'm hosting a free masterclass showing exactly how we help these people completely for free as a treat to you. DM me the word live to register. And then we simply have a ManyChat automation that looks like this, where it's like, glad to hear you're interested in the masterclass. Make sure you want to sign up. Yes, okay, register, boom, that sends them to the landing page. And then we also, alongside that on Instagram, had the setter and also the closers re-engage old leads that they'd spoken to that just hadn't converted, that may have had to think about objection, may have had a different objection, just to send them to the webinar. Because it's such a low commitment, it's a free webinar, why not? And so all of these leads all came to our registration page. Now, we build our registration pages with Lovable, as you can see here. And essentially we have, the framework for it is pretty simple. It's headline, subheadline. Sometimes we go with a VSL, but oftentimes we've actually seen better cost per lead and better registration with just with a very strong headline and then no video, just a register button. then what they're going to learn, meet your hosts, we have a lead magnet, and then of course just a bunch of client results. Now, going back to the Miro board, essentially what we ran with here is the unique angle, because this is e-commerce, but it's combining AI, TikTok, and Amazon, and leaning into the Q4 angle side of things as well. And then also because we were quite worried about attracting the wrong type of ICP. So making sure that on our landing page had a higher bounce rate than expected. However, we called out, the people we're looking to attract with, if you've got more than 5,000 to invest, copy the system that made our brand 1 million this month, once again, authority, without, these two common pain points, to make sure that we were targeting the right type of person. Then through Lovable, we used this form, which is a custom form that we built, custom coded, that asks for the name, email, phone number, everything you need to register them to a webinar. However, the craziest part about this is we're running a lot of meta ads, right? And this form autofills, when clicked on through Instagram or Facebook, it autofills their data from Instagram that they have saved. So it makes it so easy to register, and this actually really dramatically reduced our cost per lead, because initially it was above $20. And then essentially how you work this with whatever software you're using for your webinar. Normally we use Webinar Jam. We just use a webhook that catches this information, then with Zapier registers them for the webinar, and then also creates a spreadsheet row where we have the UTM and we have all of the details on them all inside of one spreadsheet. Now you may be wondering, okay, after the registration, what happens then? They get sent to a thank you page, and on our thank you page, it's very, very simple. We just have, your registration is almost complete. A quick VSL, thanking them for signing up, explaining next steps, explaining what's going to happen, explaining what they're going to learn so that they're warm when they show up to the webinar. And also, super important, I'm going to get into kind of the follow-up process. It's where they can get their lead magnet and join our WhatsApp group that was going to nurture them through the entire webinar. So this WhatsApp group is essentially a huge nurturing indoctrination place where they can get their lead magnet. We chose for the webinar a lead magnet of a 30 viral product list, because product is kind of the main thing that people start with when they start an e-com brand in terms of what they have to do first. It's like a common roadblock. So when you can eliminate a quick common roadblock, give someone a quick win, and then make them interested, okay, now what's next? Now I need to sign up, now I need to actually attend the webinar. That's kind of the angle that you want to go for your lead magnets. And then of course, a button to add to their calendar, and of course making sure they've got the email invite as well on that thank you page. We also went with an order bump, which literally popped up on the screen after they registered on this same page, which was essentially a $27 offer after someone signs up, where they get a 0 to launch playbook, they get a raffle for a one-on-one call, they get a private call with a head coach, and they also get a Q&A with the offer owners just for the VIPs. We converted about 30 people on this offer, so made about $1,000 back, which of course helps on the ad spend, although it's not a lot compared to what we spent. It also helps the pixel optimize for higher intent leads. So a lead who is going to buy this kind of order bump is much more likely to actually buy the full offer, because they're showing intent, they're showing they're ready to buy, they're much more warm. By the way, all of these images are created with AI, by the way, if you're wondering. And so yeah, it helped us optimize the pixel and also made a little bit back on the ad spend. So that's kind of the launch process, what we went for. And of course, we just promoted this everywhere for the week leading up to the webinar. Then we had our show up system. Now, considering 80 to 90% of our traffic was cold, it was super important to get people to show up, because we got 1,800 registrants. However, if we only had a 20% show up rate, that wouldn't begin. Luckily, well, not luckily, I'll get into the system now. We had a 38.5% show up rate on mostly cold traffic, and normally on cold traffic you can expect probably between 20 and 30%. So yeah, this system is very, very dialed for getting people to show up to webinars. We've seen on warm webinars 60 to 65% show up rates, which is pretty nuts. But how we do it is, of course, first of all, emails and SMS, right? So the emails that we send before the webinar are very specific, because just because someone signed up for a webinar, it doesn't mean that they actually believe in the vehicle, it doesn't mean they understand you, it doesn't mean that they're going to show up at all. And normally, people have a lot of objections in their head that are going to prevent them from showing up to a webinar, even though they've registered, even if it's not actually logistical and time related, that something came up and I can't show up. So to do that, we handled all of the common objections in our email sequences. Things like, oh, what if I need to spend money on ads? Is e-com just a is this just a get rich quick scheme? All of those things that would stop someone from showing up to a webinar, we try to handle them as much as possible in the emails. Also, removing doubts and limiting beliefs. This kind of comes under the same bucket. But you know, doing that through case studies and social proof, just making sure that we sent them an email every day that was nurturing them, that was getting them more warm, and that made them want to show up to the webinar more. And also, okay, classic reminders, and these kind of emails here kind of serve as reminders in the first place. And this is my exact email flow that I use across all of my clients. So first we confirm that they've, you know, registered for the webinar, well done, everything. 10 minutes later, they get a message to join the WhatsApp group that we run, and also get their lead magnet that's in there. And then every day after that, they get sent an email. So, you know, why they can't miss this, the story of the offer owner, agitating their pain points and their core problems, future pacing them and dropping case studies, previewing the content of the webinar, getting rid of all their objections. And then day before, morning of, 5 hours before, 2 hours before, 15 minutes live, like as much as possible. And then also SMS or confirmed SMS, 24 hours, 2 hours going live. And also for this offer, we integrated DMs on WhatsApp. So, you know, 24 hours before, 2 hours before, 15 minutes before, and going live as well. So that anyone who signed up for this webinar, they were going to join if they had any spark of interest, because they basically couldn't avoid it. It was everywhere. Not only that, but like I mentioned, we had a WhatsApp group. So this is just WhatsApp DMs. We also had a WhatsApp group where we nurtured all the leads, got all the leads into kind of one place where they got their lead magnet. And inside of that, we did polls, right? So first of all, understanding kind of the awareness level of the audience, making sure we're actually attracting the right type of people. Also, you know, asking questions like, where are you at in your e-commerce journey? What is the biggest reason you want to start e-commerce? What's your biggest goal? Because having the answers to those questions through polls in the WhatsApp allowed us to perfectly tailor the webinar presentation to the people that were actually in the group and that were going to show up. On top of that, we sent them, you know, the add to calendar link, links to case studies, valuable YouTube videos that are long form that really nurture them. Of course, we had the lead magnet. We sent voice notes and videos from the offer owners, as you can see here frequently. Here's the YouTube videos and you know, more case studies. And then after the webinar, we'll get into kind of the follow-up process. But you can also use a setter on this WhatsApp account that you create for the offer for the webinar itself, where a setter can obviously book leads in as well, because you have all the phone numbers. On top of that, we also spent just under $1,000 of our entire ad budget on Hammer Them ads, which are essentially ads with no CTAs. These are pure value ads that we, you know, scripted up some for the webinar, which essentially just give value, right? They answer common objections once again, they build trust, they tell the story of the offer owner, and they also remind people for the webinar. And we ran these only to the list of registrants, of course, and it was very low spend because it was a very small target audience. And this is essentially to warm up those colder leads who've come from cold traffic and kind of replicate the organic sales process. I highly recommend checking out some of Jeremy Haynes' stuff, but this is super important, not only just for show rate, but also for close rate, because people are coming into the webinar more nurtured and more understanding of what exactly it is we do. Moving swiftly onwards to probably the most important part of all of this. If all of this before sounded complicated, it's probably the easy part. Like getting people onto the webinar is nice and easy. Getting the right people onto the webinar is nice and easy. However, actually converting them and turning, you know, 500 people on a webinar into $140,000 in cash isn't the easiest business in the world, and you need a world-class presentation in order to do so. Our presentation was about just under 300 slides long. Here you can see we built it in Canva. And I think I've already showed this, but this is our retention graph. So, you know, at peak, we had about 580 people in the webinar. And when we finished our pitch around here, we still had, you know, just under 500 people. So a pretty good retention. Like I said, average time in the room, 1 hour and 40 minutes. And you don't get that if you have a shit presentation, right? So I'm going to be running you through the exact framework that I use for the presentation, as well as kind of some key slides and the decision-making process behind them. So this is not my framework. This is Jason Fladbian's kind of webinar framework. He's very famous for it, and it works amazingly well. So in terms of hooking the audience in right at the start, making sure people who want to show up don't just leave straight away, we use the angle of, you know, Back to the Future, very famous film, of the opportunity with e-commerce when you combine it with TikTok Shop and the way that this brand does things. Being able to travel back in time. People have missed the boats with Amazon FBA, with dropshipping, with Bitcoin, and we're presenting this opportunity as kind of the one that they shouldn't miss out on, because, you know, more people are buying online every year, building up kind of that social proof with the Amazon side of things, because Amazon is a big part of what they do. to make it like this is the biggest opportunity that you cannot miss out on if you've already missed out on other business opportunities in the past. Then instantly waking them up from the nightmare, going into kind of pain points before selling them the dream, right? So because our ICP, they're office workers, people who work good jobs, probably in London, but just want more freedom with their lives, want to start, a proper business, getting into that pain of the 9 to 5 and not having that second income stream and that freedom. And then, of course, teasing what they're going to be learning on the webinar. So our 5-pillar framework for the webinar was going to be product, supplier, branding, fulfillment, and virality. And, of course, we had fancier names for these that we were promoting during the promo period. But this was essentially the bare bones of what they were going to learn. And then after kind of teasing what they were going to learn a little bit, so you're going to learn you're going to learn how to build a product and supplier. And when you do all of that in place, we future pace them with kind of exciting them of what students have been able to do, what they're actually going to achieve if they apply what they learned today, being able to afford some of the nicer things in life, being able to go on holidays when you want them to, and things like that. And then before we actually get into this training part, before I kind of go any further, this whole part of all of this is the intro, probably about 15 to 20 minutes long. Where it says mechanisms, that's kind of the training section of the webinar, what people are actually showing up for, right? Normally broken up into quite a few different pillars, and this can last anywhere between half an hour and normally getting towards 45 minutes. Then we have like a 5-minute kind of commitment and transition before we pitch for the rest of the webinar, and then go into kind of a Q&A at the end. But yeah, so we then position them as the people that are the ones who can help them with this journey, right? They've been doing it for 6+ years. They've got a brand that does over $1 million a month. They are the right people who can help them. They've got hundreds of case studies on Trustpilot, whatever it may be. And then just before we get into the kind of mechanism section, we hit them with a paradigm shift of, you're not actually spending money on ads. There are products, our product, all of that, have hit number 1 on Amazon, have made millions of dollars without actually spending anything on ads, which is a huge paradigm shift, so it really sets the tone for what they're going to learn in the training. Of course, then we get into the mechanisms, and how you want to kind of structure these mechanisms on the webinar is like, what it is, why it's important, what they're going to miss out on if they don't implement this correctly, show them actually how to implement it correctly, then case studies of people who have implemented it correctly, and then getting their confirmation that they understand and that they're going to implement it for themselves. That's essentially the process we go through for each webinar pillar to make sure that people get the maximum value from the presentation and are as warm as possible for when we pitch. Now, after a webinar training section, you don't want to just go into hard pitching, saying, if you don't buy my offer, you're a piece of shit, all of that kind of stuff. First, you want to, have a smoother transition. Don't make it like a bait and switch. First, you want to get their commitment that, they have, been put into a better position. They have gotten value out of the training to be able to start their own brand, yes or no. Of course, we get a bunch of yeses. And then you kind of want to transition and say, you can do this yourself, but, we're here to help if you want more help, right? So they should be really fully in on the business model itself, and it's just really a question of, do they want more help or do they want to go at it alone? Normally people will want more help because you can say, you'll save hours of time, thousands of dollars when working with a mentor. And so at that point, you introduce your core offer. This is the 7.5K offer that we had. And this kind of gets broken down into 3 main pillars. I'm not going to leak the whole pitch because I think our pitch is really, really strong. But yeah, you break down the pillars into the offer, what they get, why it's important, how it's going to help them. And then we like to go for the price. And now, of course, we're not going to drop price on a 10K offer here on the webinar. But essentially, we make sure that people understand that this is expensive. It's a business model. It's a business that they have to invest in to get started with. So we say, you need 5 to 10K to join any of the different programs that we have to offer. Then, bonuses. This is probably the most important of any webinar, making sure that people understand that there is a limited time offer, there's things being added to make them take action now rather than waiting. And because this webinar, we ran it over Black Friday, just before Black Friday weekend, we offered a £1,000 Black Friday discount, and then 3 free bonuses. And these bonuses, you want your bonuses to actually be better than the offer itself, better than the core offer. It has to be absolutely ridiculous, kind of the free value that they're getting. And you want to frame it like we have here. Number 1 is different. I'll explain that. But you want to frame it like we have here. So the value of the webinar, but you get it for value of the bonus, but you get it for free. So the second bonus here was basically full branding done for you by their world-class design team. People have to pay thousands of dollars to get their branding for their e-com brands. and you kind of get it for free. You get access to all of our viral creators. These are the TikTok Shop affiliates that are very hard to find. Good UGC is very hard to find for brand owners. This is, again, things we found in our research phase. So adding this as a free bonus is absolutely phenomenal. People really, really valued it. That's the feedback we got on the sales calls as well. And these were actually all already part of the offer, the normal offer. We could have put them just in part of the offer, but framing them as free bonuses with limited time gave people that push to go and apply and go and buy now. And then I think our first bonus was, access to supplier experts, because suppliers are actually a huge, obviously, thing in e-commerce, and it's a big thing that people struggle with. So they had access to supplier experts that could help them with sourcing, save them thousands on big orders, and all of that business. So those were kind of our three bonuses, and those, the value was like $10,000, which is actually the price of the program itself. And we made sure to, emphasize the scarcity of these bonuses are only available, and the price, the discount is only available for people who apply and join the program, like right now from this webinar. And they're literally worth the entire program fee by themselves. We also then reverse the risk, so we have a guarantee of, the offer had a guarantee, so of course we're going to use it, of if your first product launch doesn't make back at least the cost of your membership and revenue within 3 months, and you follow the whole program, we work with you completely for free until you do. So there's literally no risk on your end. And if you don't have this in place for your offer, then the webinar is the perfect place to start launching and announce this sort of guarantee. Then you want to go into the Q&A. Before you do the Q&A, I kind of forgot to mention, you want to answer frequently asked questions, so FAQs, where you kind of select some objections and questions that people normally have for the offer and put them on slides so that you can answer them live and kind of handle the, do I have time for this objection? How much is this going to cost me objection? What's your success rate objection? Before you then get into an open Q&A where you open up the chat and handle objections from the chat of real people that, are interested in the offer live. This is kind of the best part of the entire webinar, where, when someone asks a question in the chat, for example, I don't know how to set up my taxes with this sort of business model. How do taxes work with this? That objection could be preventing them from closing on the offer, or at least applying and booking a call. And likelihood is when someone asks a question in the chat, there's other people who have that sort of question. It's like when you're in school, if you had a question, there was probably 2 or 3 other people with that exact same question. And so when you can handle that objection live and show your expertise in a Q&A, not in kind of a structured way, but you get a random question, it's like you have to be on the ball with it. That is kind of what tips a lot of people to go ahead and actually say, okay, this guy's the real deal. I'm going to apply. I'm going to do what he says and work with him. After the Q&A section, which can last really anywhere from like half an hour to an hour, to from 10 minutes to an hour, even for as long as you can. Then you go for the final close, which is like a recap, a final push, let's go guys, let's all apply, and then, a thank you and a good night. For webinars, you do have the option to tell people to go direct checkout on the webinar. This is typically for offers that are less than $2,000. However, for a $10,000 offer like this one, we're obviously going to be sending them to book a call. And since we do have unqualified leads on the webinar, before sending them straight to the booking page, we route them through a Calendly, as you can see here. In terms of our data, I'm just going to kind of run you through it. At peak, we had 575 people in the room. At the pitch, we had 480, so about an 83% retention rate. Out of those 480, we had 166 applications, so a 34% application rate, 94 qualified applications, so 56% of them were qualified. Out of those qualified applications, we got 64 bookings, so an overall 38.5% booking rate on applications and a 68% qualified booking rate. And 166 type forms submitted on the night, which is not too shabby, right? The typical benchmarks like 30% will apply, 30% will book, and we were slightly above on both of those, which is pretty good. In terms of how we structured the type form itself, this is really important. It was super short, 4 or 5 questions maximum. We simply asked them where they're at with e-commerce, why they want to get started, and then a budget question of, how much do you have to invest in starting this. If they said they had $0 to $2,000, we simply DQ them, said, a member of the team will be in touch soon. A setter would call them, kind of clarify their investment budget and kind of go from there. $2,000 to $5,000 would book a 15-minute kind of triage call on the setter's calendar, and then $5,000 plus would book on the closer's calendar. In total, we booked 64 calls, like I said, from the initial night of the webinar. which in total led to 27 deposits, all closed deals. I think 21 closed deals, 6 deposits in total, which was $138,907 in cash, $175,000 plus in revenue. We did have 2 refunds because this offer had a 14-day unconditional refund sort of thing. So in total, $133,500 in cash kept, and still over $175 in revenue, which is pretty nuts, including the 1 hour $35,000 cash system. But that's not all right. We only booked 64 calls on the webinar. However, with a webinar, you need a follow-up system in place because there are a ton of leads who didn't show up, who saw parts of the webinar that just didn't get pushed over the line to book a call. And you can really hoover up with a good follow-up process. So what we do with our webinars is we use a replay system. So we built a replay page, which is, the main headline of the webinar, and then kind of a CTA that says, watch the webinar and then claim the special offer, only a few spaces left to work with us down below, with the Typeform embedded on the same landing page. We made this webinar skippable. Normally we make them unskippable, but here we made it skippable so that, with a more kind of B2B audience that are more sophisticated, allowing them to skip around, take what they need, and then of course apply for the program. And then we had 3 different ways we could target all of the leads with our follow-up system. 1 being emails, 2nd being WhatsApp group, 3rd being setters. So with emails, essentially what we did is we used, once again, the copy and all of that stuff that we've used for previous webinars. If you want access to all of my SOPs and help running a webinar, then of course feel free to send a message. But essentially anyone with 0 to 2,000 on their Typeform got an email with a low ticket offer that we had for them at $997, and also the setters were phoning trying to close them over the phone for this offer if they were interested. For those who attended, straight after the webinar, like 1 to 2 hours after the webinar, they got an email saying book in a call. Then the next day we sent like a replay email, catch what you missed. Then a CTA of like, here's a recap of the bonuses, it's your last chance to apply. And then huge scarcity and urgency. This was over Black Friday weekend of like, this is your last chance. We're never doing this sort of thing again. Book in a call. And then for those who didn't show, we said replay available, offered the bonuses, same thing, last chance CTA, day by day. So this is the day after, 2nd day after, 3rd day after. This is all the people that registered but didn't show. We also sent some emails to the main list, kind of similar, replay available, and then apply, book a call, whatever it may be. We also had the WhatsApp group with about 1,000 people in it. So we did CTAs to the replay, CTAs to apply. Huge FOMO, bonuses and expiring. People are joining, like social proof of that, a bunch of client results. And the WhatsApp is really the warmest channel because it is the one that everyone can basically see. WhatsApp is quite intrusive. People use WhatsApp all the time and they're seeing these messages that actually lead them to converting. And then setters phoned leads from warmest to coldest after they'd done their triage calls and all of that, after they'd called all of the Typeform leads. So you want to go setters calling the booked calls to make sure they're qualified, setters calling the Typeform leads to make sure all of those who applied actually got booked in. Then phoning leads who attended the webinar from warmest to coldest. We export the sheet from Webinar Jam and then send them over, then filter them by their time in the live room, as you can see here. So that essentially the setters can go through and call all of the warmest leads who spent the longest time in the room from warmest to coldest to get as many bookings as possible. And this led to about 6, 7, 8 more bookings over the course of the couple of days after the webinar, which of course led to more cash. And you can see we got about 20, 10, 15 applications a day following the webinar, through the WhatsApp, through the email sequences, through the nurturing. So yeah, that's basically it. That's how we ran a full webinar for a client, basically from scratch, onboarding a couple of weeks before to making them $140,000 in literally a week. If you're an offer owner who is interested in running a webinar, working with us and having this get implemented completely done for you, then of course book a call with the link below. If you're an operator who wants to learn from me, if you want to start growth operating, learn these systems, be able to come into businesses and execute on them and license kind of my SOPs and all of that stuff and get one-on-one from me, then same thing, send me a DM on Instagram or book a call with a link in the description. Thank you for watching and take care.